Welcome everybody to our second session for International Women's Day. Maryon and Julie, we had a speaker earlier called Yvonne Hignell, who was talking about her life experiences and how they built into her career and made her the person she was. And one of the questions that came up was where she felt employers needed to support, or where she struggled the most throughout her career. And she actually mentioned the menopause. So it was a very nice segue in for us. So today is obviously all about celebrating women, but it's also really, really important that we talk about the things that that impact us throughout our lives. And obviously one of those is the menopause. So a couple of you will know Maryon and Julie. You'll have worked with them previously because they ran a program for us at Ground Control around supporting women through the menopause, and we got some fantastic feedback from that. And I'm really delighted that they've joined us again today. So Maryon is a healthcare expert and a real champion for women, and again fulfills the role of an inspirational woman. So we have two other women along today who are able to join us for that. And I spoke to them the previous week, and I felt for me that they were absolutely the right women to come in and talk to us about the menopause and the impact that it has on women. And I'm really passionate about helping us feel that we can discuss things like this in the office and environment and within the work environment, but also that we're able to support each other. And I'm really hopeful, and I'm confident also that after this call we'll all feel that. So without further ado, I will hand over to Maryon to tell us a bit about herself, and then present to us about the menopause.
Excellent, thank you. So unfortunately I can't share my slides, but Julie's going to do that. And there's a slide presentation, and then we'll have tons of time at the end for questions. Essentially, I'm here today marking International Women's Day, but also helping once again, delightedly, to be supporting women in the workplace at Ground Control. And we cut our teeth on Ground Control. It was our first corporate gig, as it were, a few years ago, and we had some big successes. We learned a lot of lessons and mistakes that we made that we've been able to correct over time, which has made our program even more effective and efficient. And I don't know if you're sharing the slides yet, Julie, but if you are, I can't see them. But I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So we can see the slides down the side as well as the main slide, and then that's it. Fantastic. Okay, so you can move on to the next one. So I have been around for quite some time, as Claire mentioned. I've written 28 books. My latest one is Manage Your Menopause Naturally, which I'm pleased to say is also my first American book, which has given me the platform here to go on TV. And in fact, this very morning, I got confirmation that my new TV series has been accepted to go national in the US after a local pilot. So I'm definitely in celebration mode today, because it's going to be so helpful to women all over the US, and hopefully we'll be able to bring the content to the UK as well. So as well as the books, I've had my own TV shows in the UK and been on lots of other programs. I used to go on TV and answer questions with Dr. Hilary Jones and Mark Porter in the mornings, and was the nutritionist for Channel 4 Model Behaviour in the UK. And I used to be, years ago, on a program with Julia Carling and Annika Rice called Capital Woman. And my team and I have actually helped tens of thousands, well, in fact, probably these days, hundreds of thousands of women with PMS and menopause very successfully using a natural approach. And so we know that this is a good first step for women coming into perimenopause and menopause. And I'm going to explain the reasons why as we go through the presentation. First of all, to focus a little bit on what menopause is up to in terms of the costs and the ghastliness of it, if you like, first of all, but then we'll dispel the horrors of menopause by talking about the solutions. So incredibly, Forbes says it costs $810 billion globally each year due to lost productivity associated with menopause. That is horrendous. And women going through menopause, they reckon that we're almost at the 1 billion mark around the world, and that women by survey want to, some of them take HRT, about 20%. Some don't have any symptoms, which is a good side to that and a bad side. I'll explain that in a minute. And then about 60% are looking for alternative solutions. And then we did a work survey on 1,000 women in the workplace. And amazingly, we didn't just find that hot flushes and night sweats were the most common symptoms. In fact, it was things like fatigue, aches and pains, brain fog, panic attacks, insomnia. So you may be kind of ticking in your mind, and please feel free to use the chat if you want to talk about any of the symptoms that bother you the most. You're welcome to, and we'll come back to that in question time. In our survey, we found, so if you can just go back there, Julie, 84% of the women said that their productivity was affected. Actually, only 20% of them were taking time off work, so they were showing up for work, but obviously not at their best. And a lot of them were scared stiff about losing their job, losing their career. And in fact, we know from surveys now that up to 20% of the women do actually leave the workplace because they get bowled over by their hormones at the time of the menopause. And we know that we can prevent that because we can help women to get their well-being back again. It costs about £5,500 per woman per year, and we can fix that. In the latest Gen M report, so Gen M is an organisation in London that's brought together about 80 brands so far, and they did a report at the end of last year showing that 87% of the women felt overlooked by brands in society generally as they were getting to menopause. And there's also a lack of awareness. 51% of the women could only name, I think it was 3 or 5 of the symptoms out of 48 listed symptoms, and very much wanted companies to improve the support that they give them in the workplace. Well, obviously Ground Control is doing just that and has been for some time. So in fact, probably you're one of the pioneers in this field, because Gen M's only been going for 2 years, and we were working in the workplace with Ground Control 3 years ago. There's tons of research about the problem. In 2017, there was a report, government review, published on 104 papers over 24 years. It was looking at menopause in the workplace. I did a review of that, and I was horrified to find that about 100 of the papers were talking about the problem, and only a few of them mentioned solutions. And I just think it adds fuel to the fire of the stigma associated and shame and this big M word, that women don't want to be associated with this because they are afraid that it's going to impact on their career, impacts on their self-esteem and everything else. And we know that from our surveys. So our latest survey on 1,100 women showed that 96% of them felt unprepared for menopause, and 2/3 of them said they felt completely robbed of life as they knew it, which is awful. And we also surveyed men. In fact, we did our first gig, including men, was one for Cisco, where the global wellbeing director invited us to present to men all over the world, as well as women, which was a bit scary at the time, but they got the best feedback on any health initiative they'd ever undertaken. And we know from our male survey that 86% of them wanted more knowledge about menopause. That's our experience. We find that men are really grateful to receive more information. They want to be supported, but they don't know how. And in terms of their own feelings, they talked about being fearful, sad, rejected, bewildered, frustrated, and even angry, because very often they are too scared to talk about it for fear of the situation blowing up. And yet they have no idea, any more than women, that there is hope at the end of this horrible dark tunnel, and that this menopause is not the end of life as they knew it. It isn't the end of life in terms of the person that you're living with that you knew. You can actually restore that person back to better than you can remember. And it's certainly not the end of life as you knew it in the bedroom, which is another subject for another day, but that can all be sorted as well. In our survey on what women want, we found that 37% of the women were prescribed antidepressants by their doctors. 84%, I think it says 85% on here, didn't think it was appropriate because they didn't have clinical depression. Of these women, 41% were prescribed hormone replacement therapy, 38% tolerated it well, 14% didn't take it because they were afraid, and 62% of the ones who did take it had to come off it because of adverse side effects. So it's not necessarily, and there are some women who can't take it for medical reasons, so it's not necessarily a panacea for everybody. We found in our survey that 91% wanted to know more about natural menopause, and in Gen M's survey recently, they found that about 50% of the women wanted to have a natural menopause. In the workplace, we discovered through, again, our workplace survey that women were very reticent to talk about menopause. They found it hard to discuss it with their boss, understandably so, because they have no idea that they can feel better. What surprised me is that even more of them said that they found it hard to talk to their colleagues about their symptoms, and they were just frightened to discuss it because of exposing themselves and feeling less capable. Some of the symptoms that women experience in the workplace that they're not talking about are awful brain fog, moodiness, feeling tired because they're not sleeping, their confidence is dented. Obviously, that makes it hard for them to make decisions in the way that they normally would. They can get upset digestion, which can be embarrassing, causing bloating and all sorts of other things. Feeling anxious, having panic attacks, palpitations, headaches often, and these terribly embarrassing thermal surges that we know as hot flushes, where you just feel like you're melting. Sometimes your hair can get wet. You lose track. Everything you're saying just goes blank as you just give in to this fiery feeling in your body. So a couple of case stories just to start the hope process. This was Jo Brewis, and she's a professor. In fact, she was one of the authors of that Government in the Workplace review that I mentioned earlier. And I met her at a menopause conference in London. And she confided in me afterwards that she had terrible brain fog. She thought she had early onset dementia because her parents had. And she had fatigue, low mood, and she also had spots on her face for the first time in her life, and she was constipated. I said, come on our program, you can't carry on feeling like that. And she did. And within the space of, it was no more than 8 weeks, her brain fog had gone, her skin was clear, her digestion was working, she had much more energy and confidence. And instead of leaving the workplace, which is what she was planning to do, because when she went into a meeting or to give a presentation, she couldn't remember what she was saying, she couldn't remember her colleagues' names, and she was really frightened. But instead of leaving the workplace, she was made head of department at her university. And so that's the kind of story that we're used to hearing. And I think there's one more. This is another of my favorite stories. This is Dr. Vivian McVeigh. She was a doctor for 20 years, GP. She then became the CEO of Virgin Care. And I met her just as we were leaving a networking meeting in London. And she told me that she'd been trying HRT. She had 3 failed attempts. Her symptoms were overwhelming, and I again invited her on our program, and within weeks, literally weeks, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks, her hot flushes and night sweats had stopped. She was sleeping through the night, her lifelong headaches had gone, and she was really able to deal with stress and all sorts of other things. In fact, we helped in Virgin in the Workplace. We helped during COVID. They've got 4,500 nurses. They're on the front line, so we helped support them. And then there was a takeover, and Virgin was taken over, and she had to go through the process of that, which was very stressful. And she managed. She's doing really well, and I'm really proud that we were part of her recovery journey. So there is hope. You don't have to go on suffering. If you can imagine waking up in the morning, feeling refreshed and energetic, with very clear thinking brain, and cool, calm, no hot flushes and night sweats, and just feeling much more like your old self. It may be even better than your old self, because we go downhill so slowly, can't remember how far down we went until we bounce back up again, and we're feeling good. So some of these symptoms you will tick and some of them you won't. There are lots of different symptoms, but these are some of the most common ones. As I said, the fatigue, this feeling of feeling old before your time. 50% of the women who go through menopause experience constipation and other gut issues, and they also get aching joints, feel really anxious. Sometimes they get panic attacks and palpitations to the point where they think they're having a heart attack. We had one patient who was on holiday in Australia, and in 4 weeks she was taken to the emergency room by ambulance 5 times because they thought she was having a heart attack. Actually, it turned out to be anxiety and panic attacks associated with her menopause. And once she came on our program, within 4 weeks, she never, ever had another one. So again, it was to do with the fact that she was running on empty and needed to have what we call a midlife refuel. And that's what this is all about, because as baby girls, we're born with millions of eggs, and we lose those eggs every month as we ovulate, and we get to perimenopause and menopause where our ovaries retire. So we've got empty receptor sites. But what's even more important, and that practically no one knows about, is that research shows that billions of women have nutritional deficiencies, and that gets worse as you get older. And we did 5 studies, which we have published in the days when I was running the advisory service, where we found up to 80% of women had low magnesium stores, they had low iron, zinc, essential fatty acids, calcium, vitamin D, and the list went on. And all of those things, when they're in short supply, and as you get older, when you've had babies, you've breastfed, you've lived life in the fast lane, you've maybe drunk too much alcohol, you've been on diets, you end up running on empty. You're a bit like a bucket with a hole in it. And therefore, it affects your brain chemistry and your hormone function. And you go into what I call economy mode. So everything is an effort. And so as you go through this phase, you need to learn to meet your nutrient levels so you can get them back into an optimum range. And you also need, because your ovaries have retired or are retiring as you get to perimenopause, those 8 years leading up to menopause, you need to fill the receptor sites. You've got to fool your brain into thinking you've got normal levels again. And you can do that naturally. And I'm going to tell you how that happens today. So the menopause is a journey. You've got your reproductive years. In your early 40s, you normally start perimenopause. It's the 8 years leading up to menopause. The average age of menopause is 51. It's actually only one day, and most people don't know that. It's the anniversary of your last period. And then you're postmenopausal for the rest of your life, and that sounds ancient. And 100 years or so ago, we weren't living much past 50. But now, when 40-something represents halfway for so many of us, we've got another 40 or even 50 years to live. And so we are not going to be comfortable in our body at that time if we don't learn how to meet our needs. So for example, we become, when we're postmenopausal, we become much more predisposed to bone loss. Before menopause, we're making 3% new bone every year, losing 3% bone, we stay in even balance. When you get to menopause, you can lose 20% of your bone mass in that period, which can actually give you osteoporosis, and that can be life-threatening for some women. Before menopause, we're less likely to have a heart attack than men. After menopause, we're more likely, and actually 50% of women after menopause die from their first heart attack. And there's also dementia, Alzheimer's. Again, all of this can be prevented. And so there's a big missing education piece. We need to learn how to get our hormones and our nutrient levels back into the correct range as we go through perimenopause and menopause. And then as we come out the end of it, we're expected to work so much longer these days, and we want to. We've got all these wonderful skills and wisdom. We want to be the best version of ourselves so that we can keep productive and also extend our wellness years. And that's what this is all about. So looking at the different stages, you've got early menopause. Some people go into menopause even earlier. They have a surgical menopause, they have a hysterectomy, and that sends them into a radical menopause, and that can be very uncomfortable. Then you've got early menopause. Some people just go into an early menopause. If your mum did, then you're more likely to. It may feel like you've got PMS for more days a month. You've got mood swings and anxiety, and you're feeling just weird, and your periods become irregular. You're not aware it's menopause because you feel like you're too young. And then you've got perimenopause. As I said, this is the 8 years leading up to menopause, where you've got the eggs are dropping off, so your receptor sites are empty. You may feel hot occasionally, maybe it becomes more frequent. You may feel that you've flatlined, that you can't experience joy so much. You may feel agitated and panicky. You may have mood swings, and you may break into tears without realizing why you're crying, or not knowing why. Sometimes you can get headaches, and your libido drops. All again because you're in economy mode. Your nutrient levels are in a low range and your hormones are tailing off. And then you've got menopause, which is the anniversary of your last period. As I said, it's just 1 year since you had a period. That qualifies you to be menopausal that day, when you can have hot flushes, night sweats, aches and pains, brain fog, depression, low libido, and a whole host of other things. And then post-menopause, as I said, it's the day after that anniversary, and you are much more at risk of all sorts of things like osteoporosis, heart disease, dementia, high cholesterol, hypertension, unmentionable things today below the waist, which we can fix as well. But if all we do today is give you hope that you can feel much, much better, then we'll have done a good job, because you don't have to have any of these awful things going on. And then the other thing that affects us is stress, and goodness knows there's enough of that in the world at the moment with everything that's going on. So our cortisol levels shoot up, our stress hormones, and we know that that can affect our weight. It can make us exhausted, depressed, give us sleep problems and brain fog. And actually, it mimics a lot of the symptoms of menopause. The hot flushes and night sweats, you may have never wondered why they come, but if you have, I'm here to tell you that it's because when you've got circulating estrogen before the menopause, if you imagine your cells are a bit like a ball, and in that little ball you've got space for a key and a lock, the estrogen finds its way into that little space and seals off and keeps everything ticking over. When your ovaries retire, you've got empty receptor sites. And so your body becomes depleted, the brain doesn't understand why, and so it's trying to kickstart your ovaries into function. It sends these thermal surges through our body, which we know as hot flushes and night sweats. It's trying to get the ovaries to work again, but obviously that's not going to happen anytime soon. We know from our almost 3 decades of helping women going through menopause that when you have a nutrient-dense diet, when you consume phytoestrogens, which are Mother Nature's estrogens, in your diet, you can satisfy the receptor sites and fool the brain into thinking all is well. And if you're doing some exercise and relaxation, you're taking some supplements that are science-based, not all supplements are equal, and in many cases they don't contain what they say on the label. But if we can keep our brain exercised and just keep ourselves active, then we will have strong bones, healthy heart, healthy brain, no menopause symptoms, and feel better than we can remember. Some women choose to take HRT, and that's fine. Sometimes it suits people very well, and we know that it will fill the receptor sites, but it won't help us with nutritional deficiencies. So you've got another part to this journey which needs to be addressed. If you are taking HRT and it's not working for you and you want to come off it, I urge you to not do that suddenly unless you've got a medical emergency. What we tend to do is get women established on our program for a couple of months, and then in conjunction with their doctors, they wean off the HRT slowly. The actual natural approach fills the receptor sites and it makes the HRT redundant. So, and if women want to carry on with their HRT, then they can still follow the natural approach as well, because it will help them to have a healthy heart, brain, and everything else, and just keep your body ticking over so that you're in the driving seat as you get older. Our program consists of 5 tried and tested ways of feeling better, and talking about each one. The first one is, are you in good nutritional shape? Now, most people haven't got a clue about that because we don't learn about it anywhere in life. We are going to be giving you a download today, which we're using for International Women's Day, which will help you detect and correct nutritional deficiencies. So if you haven't got a clue, which probably most people don't, about which nutrients you may be short of, then you can check that guide. Your face, your skin, your hair, and your nails, and your skin on your upper arms and thighs all give us clues about what you might be short of. So I don't know if you've ever felt your upper arms or your thighs for little bobbly pimples, but if you have those, then that means you've got a shortage of essential fatty acids and other nutrients. Equally, if you get cracking at the corners of your mouth, red patches at the side of your nose, dry skin anywhere on your body, if your hair is split and brittle, it's not growing or it's falling out, sometimes your nails get ridgy and split and they break. All of those things mean something in terms of nutritional deficiencies, and you'll see that very image in the download and lots more besides. The main nutrients that we're lacking, I've talked about some of them, iron, zinc, essential fatty acids, magnesium in particular. You don't store it in your body, and it's necessary for so many bodily functions. Lots of those nutrients. So really focusing on those to get yourself into good shape. And then making sure that you've got a nutrient-dense diet, that you're eating all the food groups. And if you're on a vegetarian diet, that it's a healthy vegetarian diet. You've got plenty of good protein, as well as the phytoestrogens. Things that can trigger hot flushes, if you're suffering with them, are anything that contains caffeine. It just instantly gives you a hot flush. Hot drinks, let them cool down a bit. Alcohol, even a sip of alcohol can bring on the flushes. Sugary foods, spicy foods, being stressed, and maybe sometimes some food intolerances as well. So you might bear that in mind. And when you've got your nutrients back into an optimum range, you can expect to feel clarity of mind. The aches and pains literally disappear. You get much more energy instead of feeling tired all the time. And you can sleep peacefully without feeling anxious and having palpitations. And when you've got your hormones back into balance, you'll also notice that your skin feels better. If you just move on, Julie, to the next one, we're talking about phytoestrogen. So if you look at this, on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got estradiol, which is the estrogen you have before menopause. And then on the right-hand side, you've got isoflavone, that Mother Nature's estrogen. And honestly, they're so similar. They're not identical, as you can see. If you were doing spot the difference, you'd notice, but the brain doesn't notice. And that's why feeding the naturally occurring estrogen or estrogen little and often throughout the day and the evening will help you to fool your brain into thinking everything's normal again. And these phytoestrogens have such power in our body, but they also, Mother Nature in her wisdom, it never ceases to amaze me how incredible her wisdom is, because if you had a race between her estrogen, Mother Nature's estrogen, the environmental estrogen, which are these harmful xenoestrogens that come in pollution, plastic, pesticides, those can cause cancer, and they'll jump into the receptor sites if they're not full. But if there was a race between those, the Mother Nature's estrogen, and even HRT, Mother Nature's estrogen wins the race, jumps into the receptor site, seals off the space, and so nothing harmful can get in there. So it's not just a nice idea to fill the receptor sites when you get to menopause for the sake of overcoming your symptoms, but it's also important to do that so that you don't get any of the harmful toxins in your receptor sites. And foods that are rich in naturally occurring estrogen, you've got anything that contains soya, that could be milk, yogurt, edamame beans, and so on. To a lesser extent, you've got mung beans, lentils, chickpeas, and other beans. Seeds, particularly flax seeds, are the richest source, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and so on. And then you've got, to some extent, you've got rhubarb, celery, fennel, mung beans, alfalfa. There's a few other things, but they don't really contain a lot. So, you can have some hummus at lunchtime, but it won't necessarily deliver a lot, but it will give you some. And then supplements, as I said, this is not a regulated industry. We need to get supplements into your body that are what they say on the label and that are going to suit your symptom set. And there are some supplements that have been through properly conducted clinical trials, and we use those as part of our program. So it's a fast track to help to overcome your symptoms. Exercise is another part. It doesn't mean you have to run a marathon. It could just be getting out your chair and dancing to your favorite music for 5 minutes to build yourself up again, and taking walks in nature, just doing everything you can to get yourself active. I got myself a hula hoop, which I hadn't had since I was really young. And sometimes in the evening, instead of just sitting on the sofa, I use the hula hoop. It gives me a bit more energy and use up a few more calories before the day is done. So there's just finding what works for you. You don't have to be a gym bunny. You don't have to run a marathon. Just find the kind of exercise you enjoy, but you need to be doing exercise regularly. Really important to do that too. It helps to oxygenate your brain. It helps to speed up your metabolism so you lose the fat. It helps to and just to keep your body in good shape as well. And that isn't a given as you get older. And then relaxation, formal relaxation has been shown to reduce hot flushes and night sweats by 50 to 60%. Also helps to rewire your brain, lower cortisol, the stress hormone, so lots of reasons. And very often we know women can't switch off, and so we've got lots of tips and tricks for people to do guided meditations to actually get them into a really deep relaxed state and come out again feeling like they've had a good sleep so that they feel energized again. So in the workplace, there are many things that you can do. We have got other presentations on how you have conversations, how you get yourself ready for this phase in your life, how you communicate to other members. If you're a line manager and you're male and you're young, it may be daunting because you've got older women who are very embarrassed. It may be embarrassing for you too. So it's not an overnight turnaround, but if you're supportive and inclusive, which is what today is all about, then and you give each other permission to have an honest and frank conversation and keep it confidential, and just use your listening skills to help to understand, especially when women are trying to get through this. It is only a life stage. It's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean that when people get to menopause, it's the end of their usefulness. It can be a whole new chapter, a whole new incredible beginning. And therefore, it's really worth investing in your team and talking to your colleagues about it, because although you may feel like a pod in the London Eye as you go through this and it's only happening to you, trust me, it isn't. As I said, there are billions of women who are going through this, or a billion women around the world at the moment who are going through this, and they are suffering in a similar way to you, looking for solutions and really feeling very confused and not knowing what to do, with little hope. So hopefully today will give you hope that you can feel better, and hopefully this is the beginning of a new journey at Ground Control, where we'll be helping to provide more support and determining exactly what kind of help you need as we go through 2023. And hopefully anything that you do to get yourself feeling better will have an impact on you outside the workplace as well, because it helps to improve your self-esteem and as well as your relationships at home, and obviously makes you much more productive in the workplace. So supporting women by signposting them to practices like ours and other things like relaxation and mindfulness, maybe adjusting the work environment a little bit, especially if it's summer and it's hot, if they're working in the office. Obviously, if you're working at home, it's easier. You can cool yourself down in the short term. It doesn't take that long. We have a 6-week program, and usually by 6 weeks, most people are feeling pretty in the driving seat and most of their symptoms have disappeared. But having the signposting to effective solutions is a really healthy thing to do, rather than focusing on the problem. And what we're doing is getting women through this midlife transition. So instead of feeling anxious and scared and with brain fog and fatigue and not being able to concentrate, you just feel cool, calm, productive, clear thinking, energetic, and recognize yourself as the person that you used to be before you started going downhill. So that's it, and we've got some time left for questions, plenty of time. So you can turn that off now, Julie. Thank you so much for doing that for me today. And I'm sure there is chat somewhere or other, if I can find it. And I think Claire's probably going to throw the questions at me, so go ahead.
Yes, I will do. So we have a question from Jane, but just before I hand over to Jane, we also have a question from Sam about HRT. So he was asking what the common side effects of HRT were.
Okay, well, it depends. I think it's very different for different women. Some women feel that they can't function, they don't feel well on HRT, and they gain weight, and it just makes them feel headachy. Sometimes they feel anxious. It's just very different for different women. But I think, you know, when you take HRT, I mean, I know years ago when I was much younger, I had period pains and they gave me the pill. And I took that, and it just made me feel very low and depressed and lethargic, and I actually did put a lot of weight on. So it's different for different women. Other women take it, they swear by it, they think it's the best thing they ever took. So it does vary.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane?
Yeah, I was going to say, Maryon, you said earlier that 20% of people have no symptoms at all, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't come back to that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. So why I say it's a good thing because they don't suffer with symptoms, but a bad thing because when you suffer with symptoms, you tend to go and look for solutions. And when women come to us, for example, we not only teach them how to manage their symptoms, but we also teach them how to keep themselves in good shape in the long term. So they know how to prevent osteoporosis and heart disease and dementia, and the awful dryness that you can get after menopause. Your skin dries out, everything dries out. There are things that you can do to fix that. Now, if you don't have any symptoms, you think you're okay. As time goes on and you get into your 60s and so on, the chances are you are just as predisposed to all those things as the women who had the symptoms. So it's a shame in a way that they didn't have to find a solution, because they're then left feeling that this is just part of the aging process and that there's nothing they can do about it, because it just means, I'm 60 now, or I'm 50 something, or whatever it is, and this is my lot. When actually the research shows that is clearly not the case.
And does it normally follow in families, Maryon? So if your family had a really bad experience of menopause, does that mean that you will have?
It very, very often women follow their moms. So if your mum had an early menopause, for example, then the chances are you will too. And if she had a really bad menopause, then you may too as well. But but having said that, the earlier you start fixing it, you can circumvent all of that. So you don't need to go down the black hole if you know how to meet your needs. And obviously in your mum's generation, they probably didn't know.
You sent me into a panic, Maryon, saying that I could be like my mother, and then pull me back out saying if I didn't eat the number of biscuits that she used to, that I'd be okay. We have another question. We've got a question from Samantha, who is asking, and it was a question I was going to ask as well. You mentioned about supplements, and you said that a lot of them were not really science-based. So which ones would you recommend for people?
Well, we have got, in my latest book, there's a chapter on the different supplements where I talk about the science-based supplements. There are a fair amount of them, and it just depends on each individual. Everyone needs to take a multivitamin and mineral for a start, but it needs to be one that's standardized. So that means, when I say standardized, it means it's got the same in the packet or pot every month. So you know what you're getting, and it's been made pharmaceutical standards. So they haven't all got that. And then we use some supplements that have been through clinical trials that contain naturally occurring estrogen. And there are a few of those that we can use depending on people's tolerance. Then there's things like vitamin D, which is good for hormone health. It's good for bladder health. It's good for preventing, boosting your immunity. protecting you from COVID, that kind of thing. Magnesium for some women, and different sorts of magnesium depending on their gut tolerance. There are supplements that can actually influence the hormone producing glands in your body. And again, there are clinical trials on certain things. And if you're interested in that, obviously we can talk more about that in other webinars where we, talk. And obviously on the course, we tend to tailor make a program for each individual woman. So then they know exactly what they should be taking, when they should be taking it, what the dose is, and so on, so that they get over their symptoms, because the supplements do help us to fast track. But as I said, it is unregulated industry. I was once asked to recommend a product, which I won't name, but it was supposed to contain 39 milligrams of isoflavones per pill. And an independent analysis just about that same time showed that it only contained 1 milligram. And so these things are just not regulated.
Thank you. So we've got 3 questions in the chat, and then I'll hand over to Lenka, who's put her hand up. So Hannah was asking, how much of the phytoestrogen-rich foods do you actually need to eat?
So again, we're aiming to have about 100 milligrams of isoflavones a day. And that is all very well if you know what contains what. So we have lists of foods that are rich. So for example, in a glass of soya milk, 250 ml glass of soya milk, you've got 20 milligrams of isoflavones. And then you've got some in flax seeds, you've got some in edamame beans. So we're consuming them throughout the day, little and often, because the receptor sites don't stay full for very long. And so it's a question of learning how to weave them into your diet.
And Andrea asked if there was a difference to managing a natural menopause to a surgical menopause.
Well, a surgical menopause is where you have a hysterectomy, and very often they take your ovaries away as well. And so that sends you into a rapid menopause. At that point, depending on how old you are, you're probably going to be offered HRT. And some women do well on it, some women don't. Sometimes people have a surgical menopause, or they may even have breast cancer, and then they're not a candidate for HRT. If you've got a history of breast cancer or ovarian cancer or blood clots and so on in your family, then you're not usually a candidate for HRT. So having a natural menopause is, from our perspective and many doctors' perspective, it's the baseline. It's the first thing to do to get yourself into good shape. And as I said, our program is so effective that most women are feeling pretty symptom-free. It was a 5-month program, started out as a 5-month program. And then a few years ago, I made 4 films for Facebook, which I posted just from my phone. So they weren't very good quality, but they went on Facebook. Within 12 weeks, over 1 million women saw the films. And so we were inundated with suffering. So we took the 5-month program that I used to run in my clinics with my team, and we turned it into a 6-week course. So it's like 6 bite-sized modules, teaching women about all that science shows works. So, we have 1 week where we focus on how do you get your nutrients into an optimum range, another week where, how do you get the isoflavones into your day, another one on which supplements should you take and why, with all the research about them, and so on. So we go through the science, and so that people can actually understand what the research shows and they can apply it.
Thank you. Sam asked for the name of your book, and I think Julie has Julie's popped it up, saying it's Manage Your Menopause Naturally. And what Jane has said is we'll get a couple of copies. There we go, and we'll put them in the Billericay library, and we can post them out to people as well. Okay. But if I hand over to Lenka to ask her question.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, Maryon. So I guess my question is very similar to I don't know who it was who just asked on the comments, but have you ever dealt with a chemically induced menopause previously? And is there differences between natural and induced menopause through cancer? So I was one of those patients, and as you've just answered, that HRT would not be ideal option for me. what are the other steps, and how do I attend your 6-week course?
Okay, so I've got 2 women on our current program actually, which is coming up to week 5, who were quite young when they had breast cancer. So that sent them into an early menopause. And what we do is everyone fills in a questionnaire and diet diary, and then we tailor a program for each individual person. And obviously, if you've got a history of cancer, then we tailor that for you, always very mindful about what to recommend in terms of supplements that won't conflict with any medication, depending on the stage you're at as well, you know, whether you're out the end of your medication or you're still taking it, and just mindfully get you through the process. So that's, you can, if you just want to go on the program, then you can get in touch with Julie and she'll send you information. Or you can hold on and see where ground control is going. I'm not quite sure. And we'll be having conversations after this today about what support there'll be in the workforce.
There's definitely going to be a focus anchor on us supporting women going through the menopause. As we talked in the earlier sessions today, there's a lot that Jane and I are looking at the moment from a benefits perspective and from a support perspective as well.
And I think there's some really quick wins, you know, instead of providing all sweets, we could change some of those for flax seeds. We could have some hula hoops in the office. There's a few easy things that we can think about really in the office environment.
Yeah, one of the things is to make it okay for women to just do a 20-minute formal relaxation session after lunch. Do you know that? If you do, we use an app which takes you into a really deep, relaxed state and brings you out again. It was created by neuroscientists. Just taking a break to rest and rewire makes you much more productive. So you're not going to lose anything by doing that. You know, those kind of things are just easy.
So we have the Calm app that people can sign up to, and we just sent out another, I think we have about 250 people, Maryon, doing that regularly, and it's due for review. So we've asked people to, if they want to sign up to that relaxation app, which I think a lot of people find really, really helpful.
Good. Yeah, we use one called Paziz. It's a slightly different system, but it's the same kind of principle. But you need to do, the research shows you need to do at least 20 minutes a day.
Okay, so you can all sign up. Got a chance to get the app and start doing that, ladies and gentlemen.
And Francis has asked, what food or supplements help with bone density and heart health, or will the phytoestrogen-rich foods do that?
Yeah, so if you think about Asian communities, that's a good question. If you think about Asian communities, the research shows that they have half the incidence, when they're consuming a traditionally Asian diet, they have half the incidence of estrogen-dependent cancer, heart disease, dementia, and bone loss. And that's because they've been having the phytoestrogens in their diet and also oily fish. And those are the reasons why we think that happened. They followed a group of women from Japan to America, and as they started consuming a Western diet and all the rubbish, then they got the symptoms. And in fact, in Japan, they didn't even used to have a term for hot flush in their language, but obviously they do now. So they are having the fight. It's really, I describe my program a bit like a pie, in that, you know, when you cut a pie, you've got all the different segments. So each thing that I was talking about, the 5 tried and tested ways, you need to have a bite of each slice to benefit. It isn't magic that you could just have some phytoestrogen food and be necessarily clear and free of all the things that may happen to you. You need to take some time and give yourself permission, especially on International Women's Day, to think about making yourself a priority. Because I know I had 4 kids. I've had a really busy work life with the advisory services I've run, with my books and my husband and everything else. You just leave yourself till last. You know, you become the lowest thing on the chain. And it's not until you actually get sick or fall over or whatever happens that you actually have to focus on yourself. So giving yourself permission just for a few months as you go through this transition to really invest in yourself, a bit of time to change your diet, to eat well, to do your exercise, do your relaxation, find the right supplements, all of that kind of thing. Make time for it, because it will pay huge dividends in the long term, and it will help you be the person that you're meant to be in the much longer term.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to ask any other questions?
I think there's at least one person in the audience that I can see who's actually been through our program. I don't know, I'm not going to mention her name in case she doesn't want to say anything, but I just wonder if you want to talk about your experience.
Maybe that's me then. I don't know if any of you other people were on the course. It was very good, several weeks of lots of different information that Maryon has just given a small overview right now. There's a lot to fit into an hour's talk, isn't there, Maryon? Flaxseed, I absolutely added to like lots of different foods. That is great for your body. And also I went decaf on everything. Teas, coffees. I cut down on alcohol, which I know if you know me, you probably think that is difficult for me. It was difficult for me, but I really stuck at it. And again, it helps with your hot sweats, keeping you calm, sleeping properly. So overall, an excellent course. So thank you very much.
No, that's good. It's good. It does have good impact. Anybody else?
I think Maddie, you had a question as well.
I did. I had a question, but I took my hand down because it wasn't me that attended your course. I didn't want there to be any confusion. It was just a quick question about what support and where would you signpost husbands, partners, friends, basically male counterparts that have to go through the menopause with their lovely partners or friends or work colleagues. What kind of support is out there for them? And if they're worried about maybe their partner or somebody at work and they don't necessarily know how to support them, or they want to find out more information, what kind of resources are there out there for them? Because I know there's a couple of men on the call as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. After we did our men's survey, we set up a Facebook group called Menopause, where men could go and kind of meet each other and cry on each other's shoulders and look for solutions. So we kind of gave them a bit of support. That's kind of not being very loved, that group, at the moment. I did actually let a few new men in there the other day, Julie. We must go and revisit that. But we created some tools for men. I made about 100 weekly wisdom films on different aspects of menopause, and we did a couple for men on how to support your partner going through menopause. And we also did a little download called, I think it's Every Man's Guide to Menopause. So we've got some materials. We have a midlife refuel club as well, which is a resource that's got a lot of our self-help material in there. And so although the men can't join that, it's for women, they can download stuff in there and share it. And we also have some material on conversations, how to have conversations. I did a presentation at the Midlife Refuel Club not very long ago on, how do you bring up the subject with your partner? How do you set the scene, practice what you're going to say, get yourself really ready so that you don't end up in a heap and end up having falling out over it. And instead it kind of brings you together with understanding. So we have got materials for all of that.
It's really good, because I think it's really important, because like you said, I think sometimes when you're going through it yourself, you're not necessarily aware of it, or you're not necessarily aware the symptoms that you're experiencing are the menopause. So if you've got someone who's well equipped, a partner or husband who's slightly stepped back from it and can see the changes or knows the symptoms, then that can be really supportive. And I think, Claire, it's something that we should do as a session for our mental health first aiders as well, because a lot of the symptoms that come with menopause go hand in hand with depression, anxiety. So it's something that we can flag, and obviously we can be aware of and have those conversations if needed as well.
Honestly, you raise, and as Lou said, I can't get everything in an hour, but there are so many crossovers between menopause and mental illness. And so many women get misdiagnosed with mental illness, and that's not the case at all. And in the old days when I had my clinic in Harley Street, when men or partners came with their partners to the consultations and they went through the journey together, it was a really good outcome. You know, they were a real team and they came out of it very strong together. So there are so many benefits. And equally in the workplace, you know, if your line manager knows the score and knows that this is just a transition and it's worth me investing in this person who I really respect and has been in the workplace for a long time, I can just help them by giving them a little bit of extra support and they'll come through in a matter of weeks or a few short months to being back to normal again and back to being fully productive, maybe even more productive than they were before, because they would have kind of, you know, you don't just suddenly wake up one day not productive. You know, it's a process over time as your hormones are changing, when it's harder and harder for you to show up as the person that you used to be.
So I'm conscious of time, and we've got one more question. We've got Sarah, who has got her hand up.
Hey, sorry, Maddie, that is so relevant, especially in the news when you think about people like Nicola Bulley and mental health and the menopause. I mean, it's obviously been in the media a lot recently. Thank you so much for today. It's been so interesting and so much to look forward to as a woman, as if it wasn't bad enough already. I guess my question is to do with menopause. Just in terms of the symptoms that I saw up there and, you know, things to look out for, I feel like I have a lot of those symptoms already because I'm a mother of young children. So I guess my question is, you know, some of those symptoms, they're like just day to day of sometimes being a woman in a busy environment and, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, when is it a step change? When is it like it's exhaustion beyond the point? Or, you know, how do I differentiate between just everyday life and those actually being, you know, it's serious sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, that's a really valid question as well. So what happens, because before we help women going through menopause, we were helping women with PMS, obviously younger women who are having their children. When you have babies and you breastfeed, your nutrient levels take a nosedive because Mother Nature makes sure you give the best of the nutrients out to the baby during pregnancy and again when you're feeding. So you get left in a really low state. Now, that can mean that your PMS gets worse. And so a lot of the symptoms you may have may be just bad PMS. It may not be that you're going into an early menopause, but there are certain, if your periods are really irregular and, you know, there are certain things that represent you're going into perimenopause. I mean, Julie is a classic example. When she came to work for me, I don't know if you just want to quickly tell your story, Julie, because you had no idea it was perimenopause, did you? But
No.
conversely, just before Julie tells her story, I can remember having patients where they thought they were going into menopause and their periods had stopped. They were in their early 40s. When we got them back into good nutritional shape and they had this midlife refuel, their periods came back again. They didn't have symptoms and they just carried on. That's the best scenario. But equally, if you go into perimenopause, as Julie did, without realizing, Julie just...
2 seconds. Yeah, I didn't have the classic symptoms. So I didn't have hot flushes and I wasn't anxious and I wasn't losing my mind, although I think some of my friends probably thought I did. My symptoms were that I had insomnia, chronic insomnia. I didn't sleep for 2 years and I had aches and pains and I just thought I was getting old. Exactly like you're saying, your exhaustion from children. I thought I was just getting old. I'd turned 50 and anyway, the good news is that I did do the programme and I did follow it religiously because I had to hand my notes in every week to the teacher. That it all disappeared in 6 weeks and I was back to now running and boxing, and most nights I sleep 7 or 8 hours. So, you know, there is hope at the end of the tunnel, but it's not always the obvious symptoms. And when I gone to the doctor, all they wanted to do was give me painkillers and sleeping tablets. And actually it was perimenopause and it disappeared. So we'll leave on that note.
I think whatever stage you're at, you can do with a refuel, especially if you've had kids. You know, you may not technically be perimenopausal. That's irrelevant. You just need to get yourself into really good shape.
It's a really good note to end on. Maryon, Julie, thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible. It was just yet another session where you've completely inspired me. So thank you, and I'm sure everybody else feels the same. And thank you to everyone who's attended as well, and especially the women, but also the men. It's really great to see you show up here and give your support and come to learn as well. So thank you. And happy International Women's Day to everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and thank you to you, Claire, for organising 2 brilliant sessions. Thank you so much. We must continue through the year with our sessions rather than just doing it once a year, ladies, because it's been brilliant today. Thank you so much.
Have
Lovely
a great
to see you
day,
all.
guys.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.
Bye.
Thank you.